Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring Dr. Friedman Schaub's book, The Empowerment Solution,
Yeah.
which really digs into these 6 common survival patterns that keep us, especially in today's world, feeling powerless
Yeah.
and how to shift from surviving to thriving.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this stuff.
It's a very, very relevant topic.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of ironic in a way, right? That,
Yeah.
we're promised this sort of like hyper-connected world through technology,
Mm.
but so many people end up feeling disconnected, especially from themselves.
Totally. And like just that constant pressure to be like on all the time.
Yeah.
It can leave us feeling like we're just treading water, right?
Yeah.
And Dr. Schaub, he points out that 35% of working adults, according to the National Health Institute, are not getting enough sleep, which is
Oh.
like, I'm not surprised.
No wonder we feel powerless.
Yeah, we're exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're running on fumes while trying to juggle a million things and, to cope our subconscious minds. Yeah, they're always looking out for danger.
Right.
They fall back on these familiar patterns that are often rooted in like childhood experiences.
It's like our brains are saying, well, hey, this worked back then.
Exactly.
So let's just stick with it,
Yeah.
even if it's not really serving us anymore.
Yeah, it's fascinating how those early experiences can shape our subconscious responses to things.
Totally. Okay, so let's dive into these 6 survival patterns.
Okay.
First up is the victim pattern.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure we all know someone who seems to be perpetually wronged, always blaming others for their misfortunes.
It's like they're stuck in a loop of self-pity and resentment.
Yeah.
Dr. Schaub shares the story of Patricia, who carried the hurt of her childhood into adulthood, always perceiving herself as a victim.
Oh, wow.
But here's the catch. She wasn't consciously choosing this pattern.
Right.
It was her subconscious clinging to a familiar role.
It's almost like a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we help someone like Patricia break free?
Well, Dr. Schaub proposes this process called the disentanglement process.
Okay.
This isn't about forgetting the past, but rather forgiving it.
Okay.
It's a structured approach to letting go of emotional attachments and negativity from past relationships.
Forgiveness can be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how does Dr. Schaub approach this in a way that feels empowering and not like we're just letting the offender off the hook?
Well, he emphasizes that forgiveness is about freeing ourselves,
Mhm.
not condoning the actions of others.
Right.
It's like releasing a heavy weight we've been carrying for too long. Reclaiming our energy and choosing to move forward, unburdened by the past.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next pattern, which is the invisibility pattern.
Yeah.
I think this one might resonate with a lot of listeners, especially those who, like me, had a bit of a rough childhood.
Yeah.
It's about shrinking back, staying quiet, and avoiding attention at all costs.
It's a classic way of trying to stay safe.
Yeah.
Especially if expressing yourself led to, negative consequences in the past.
Right.
Think of Paula, who grew up in an abusive household.
Yeah.
Even after escaping that environment, she remained terrified of crowds and travel.
Wow.
Her subconscious was still trying to protect her
Yeah.
by keeping her invisible.
That makes me think of my own struggles with OCD as a kid.
Oh, really?
It was like I was constantly worried about some divine test, so I tried to be so good that God wouldn't even notice me.
It's a prime example of how these patterns can develop even in seemingly normal upbringings,
Yeah.
Certain events can trigger these subconscious survival mechanisms.
Yeah.
They create a blueprint for how we interact with the world.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes these mechanisms continue to run the show long after the original threat is gone.
Yeah, it's like we become prisoners of our own past.
Yeah.
And in today's world with social media constantly showing us everyone else's highlight reel,
Right.
I can see how the invisibility pattern could be even more tempting.
Absolutely. The fear of judgment and rejection can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
It's like a constant battle between wanting to connect and wanting to stay safe.
I have a confession to make. Back in the day, I fell for the whole FOMO thing hard. I remember going to these parties where to fit in with the cool kids, we had to earn points for things like kissing girls.
Oh, wow.
It was humiliating, I know.
It speaks to that deep human need to belong. But what's fascinating is that you recognized the unhealthy pattern
Right.
and you chose to break free from it.
Yeah, it took a while, but eventually I realized that true belonging comes from being authentic,
Right.
not from contorting myself to fit in.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means embracing the discomfort of standing out.
And that's a powerful lesson because ultimately the cost of invisibility is far greater than the discomfort of being seen.
Right.
It's like we're trading our authenticity for a false sense of safety.
Totally. All right, on to the next survival pattern, the procrastinator pattern.
Yes.
I think we've all been there at some point, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Putting things off, getting distracted, feeling overwhelmed by that ever-growing to-do list.
Procrastination is a tricky one. What's interesting is that it often stems from a fear of discomfort.
Yeah.
We avoid tasks that trigger anxiety or feelings of inadequacy, even if that avoidance creates more stress in the long run.
Yeah, it's like a vicious cycle. We procrastinate to avoid feeling bad, but then we feel even worse because we haven't tackled the task.
Exactly.
Dr. Schaub actually talks about a client named Brian whose unstable childhood led to procrastination as a coping mechanism.
Brian's story is a powerful reminder that procrastination, while offering temporary relief, can have a ripple effect on our lives.
Yeah.
It can jeopardize relationships, careers, and even our sense of self-worth.
So how do we break free from this procrastination trap? It's easy to say, just do it.
Right.
But that doesn't always work, does it?
It's not about willpower. It's about understanding the underlying fear.
Okay.
Dr. Schaub suggests a brilliant solution: visualization. He encourages us to focus on the positive outcomes of taking action, rather than fixating on the discomfort of the task itself.
Like that. It's like we're rewiring our brains to associate those tasks with positive feelings instead of dread.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the chameleon pattern? This one's all about constantly adapting to fit in, which can lead to a real sense of losing yourself.
The chameleon pattern is particularly relevant in today's image-obsessed culture.
Yeah.
We're bombarded with messages about who we should be, how we should look, and what we should be doing.
Totally.
It's no wonder so many of us end up feeling like you're wearing a mask.
Right, and Dr. Schaub shares the story of Terry, whose family moved frequently during her childhood.
Right.
So she became so used to blending in and avoiding genuine connection that it became her default mode of being.
It's like she lost touch with her true self in an attempt to be accepted wherever she landed.
That really resonates with me. I used to be the funny guy, always cracking jokes to get approval. It took a while to realize that I was sacrificing authenticity for fleeting moments of belonging.
You hit the nail on the head. The chameleon pattern often stems from a deep-seated fear of rejection.
Yeah.
It's like we're saying, I'll be whoever you want me to be.
Yeah.
Just please don't reject me.
But here's the paradox, right?
Yeah.
The more we try to be someone we're not, the more disconnected we feel from ourselves and others.
Exactly. Genuine connection can only happen when we show up as our authentic selves, even with all our imperfections.
Right.
It's about embracing our uniqueness, not trying to erase it.
That's a great segue to our next pattern, which is the helper pattern.
Okay.
I think this is one a lot of us, especially women, can relate to. It's about overgiving, putting everyone else's needs before our own, and often ending up feeling resentful.
It's a classic case of good intentions gone awry. The helper pattern can stem from a variety of factors, from societal expectations to childhood roles.
Yeah.
For example, Dr. Schaub tells the story of Jim, who grew up as the peacemaker in his family.
Oh, wow.
He learned to seek validation through helping others,
Okay.
even to the detriment of his own well-being.
So it's like we're conditioned to believe that our worthiness is tied to our ability to help others.
Exactly. And while helping others is a beautiful thing, it
Right.
can become a problem when we neglect our own needs in the process.
Right.
It's like we're running on an empty tank, giving and giving until we have nothing left to give.
And then the resentment builds, which can ultimately damage our relationships.
Yeah.
I've definitely been there. So how do we break free from this pattern? How do we learn to say no without feeling guilty?
Well, Dr. Schaub emphasizes the importance of recognizing that self-care is not selfish.
Right.
It's essential.
Yeah.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before assisting others.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's about creating healthy boundaries and recognizing that giving isn't always better than receiving. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to prioritize our own well-being.
And that's where self-commitment comes in.
Okay.
It's about honoring our own needs and making ourselves a priority.
That makes sense. It's like we're building a strong foundation for ourselves so we can show up for others from a place of wholeness, not depletion.
Exactly. And that leads us to our final pattern, the lover pattern.
Okay.
This is about desperately seeking love and validation in romantic relationships, often leading to unhealthy patterns and feeling unworthy.
It's like we're trying to fill an inner void with external love,
Right.
which, as we all know, never quite works.
It never quite works.
Dr. Schaub tells a truly heartbreaking story of Judith, who kept choosing avoidant partners who mirrored her childhood experience of neglect.
It's a classic example of how our subconscious can recreate familiar patterns in our adult relationships.
Wow.
Even if those patterns are harmful,
Yeah.
it's like we're drawn to what's familiar, even if it hurts.
So how do we break free from this cycle? I imagine it's about learning to love and accept ourselves first.
Precisely. Dr. Schaub argues that the key to overcoming the lover pattern lies in cultivating self-love.
Hmm.
It's about recognizing our inherent worthiness, regardless of our relationship status.
It's like we're reclaiming our power and choosing to love ourselves unconditionally instead of waiting for someone else to do it for us.
Exactly. It's a powerful shift in perspective.
So we've explored these 6 survival patterns.
Right.
The victim, the invisible, the procrastinator, the chameleon, the helper, and the lover.
Right.
It's clear that they can keep us stuck in a cycle of powerlessness. But here's the good news. Dr. Schaub believes we can break free. He provides 6 keys to self-empowerment that correspond to each of these patterns.
Okay.
And I'm really curious to dive into those.
Let's unpack them. It's all about flipping the script, so to speak.
Okay.
For the victim, it's about embracing self-responsibility.
Right.
The invisible needs self-compassion.
Okay.
The procrastinator can find freedom in self-reliance.
Okay.
The chameleon needs self-reflection.
Okay.
The helper needs self-commitment.
Okay.
And the lover, well, they need self-love.
It's like we're transforming those old limiting patterns
Yes.
into empowering forces that can propel us forward.
Yes.
It's about choosing conscious responses over subconscious reactions.
That's it, exactly. It's about becoming the authors of our own stories, rather than living out scripts written in our past.
This is already so insightful. I can't wait to explore these 6 keys in more detail.
Let's do it. There's so much to uncover.
All right.
Yeah. And here's where Dr. Schaub's work gets really interesting. He doesn't just tell us what to do, he provides a framework for actually working with our subconscious minds
Okay.
to shift those survival patterns into these keys.
Okay. I'm all ears. It sounds almost too good to be true. Like, can we really reprogram our subconscious minds?
Well, think of it this way. Your subconscious is like a loyal protector, maybe even a bit overprotective, who's been running the show for a long time. It's got all these strategies in place to keep you safe, but they might be outdated.
Right.
To convince this part of you to let the conscious adult you take the lead requires trust building.
So it's not like flipping a switch.
Yeah.
It's more like a gentle persuasion.
Exactly. It's about consistency, showing up for yourself in a reliable way, and demonstrating that you've got your own best interests at heart.
That makes sense. But how do we actually communicate with this subconscious protector? It's not like we can sit down and have a rational conversation, right?
Right. Logic doesn't always work. Dr. Schaub argues that the language of the subconscious is imagery, emotions, and sensations.
Okay.
He suggests using visualization techniques to connect with that inner child,
Okay.
the part of us that's still holding on to those survival patterns.
Oh, like those exercises where you imagine going back to a specific childhood memory and offering comfort and reassurance to your younger self.
Yes. It's about acknowledging the pain and fear that led to those patterns in the first place,
Right.
and showing your inner child that you're there to protect them now. You're not that helpless child anymore.
Yeah, I can see how that would be powerful, but if I'm being honest, a part of me is still skeptical. Can we really just rewrite our subconscious programming that easily?
It's not about erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. It's more about reframing those experiences and creating new empowering beliefs. It does take time and practice, but Dr. Schaub argues that the subconscious is remarkably adaptable.
So it's like we're not stuck with those old stories.
Right.
We can actually create new narratives that serve us better.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And by doing so, we unlock the potential that's been dormant within us. It's like we're finally free to be our authentic selves.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light here. So let's delve deeper into these 6 keys to self-empowerment.
Okay.
What are some practical steps we can take to cultivate each one? Let's start with self-responsibility, which is the antidote to the victim pattern.
Okay, it's all about shifting from blame to ownership.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that even in challenging situations, we have the power to choose our responses.
Right.
It doesn't mean we have control over everything that happens to us,
Right.
but we can control how we react.
It reminds me of that dynamic awareness technique Dr. Schaub talks about. Is that what you're getting at?
Dynamic awareness is about becoming aware of our thoughts and feelings in the moment
Okay.
and choosing how we want to respond rather than reacting on autopilot. It's like hitting the pause button before we get swept away by our habitual patterns.
So instead of blaming the world, we take a breath and ask ourselves, okay, what's my role in this? What can I learn from this? What choices can I make to move forward?
Exactly. It's a powerful shift in perspective. And it takes practice, but the more we do it, the more empowered we become.
That makes a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
So what about self-compassion? The key to overcoming the invisibility pattern. What does that look like in practice?
Self-compassion is about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a loved one.
Okay.
It's about silencing that inner critic and embracing our imperfections.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes, we all have flaws, and that's okay.
I think this is where a lot of us struggle. We're so quick to judge ourselves harshly.
Right?
Dr. Schaub talks about becoming aware of our self-talk, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He suggests noticing how often we criticize ourselves and consciously choosing more supportive and encouraging language.
Oh.
It's like retraining our minds to be our own best friend, not our worst enemy.
Yeah, it's like that saying, talk to yourself like you would talk to someone you love. That's a great reminder. Okay, what about self-reliance, the antidote to the procrastination pattern?
Self-reliance is about developing a sense of inner strength and resilience.
Okay.
It's about trusting ourselves to handle whatever life throws our way, knowing that we have the resources and capabilities to overcome challenges.
So it's not about doing everything ourselves or never asking for help.
Right.
It's about believing in our ability to navigate the ups and downs of life.
Exactly. And a big part of this is setting healthy boundaries.
Okay.
It's about learning to say no when necessary
Right.
and prioritizing our own needs. It's
Yeah.
about protecting our energy and time so we can show up fully for the things that truly matter.
You know, I've always struggled with saying no. I feel like I'm letting people down or being selfish. But what you're saying is that it's actually an act of self-respect and self-love.
It is. It's about recognizing that you're worthy of having your needs met.
Yeah.
And often when we set healthy boundaries, we're actually teaching others how to treat us with respect.
That's a great point. Okay, on to self-reflection, the key to breaking free from the chameleon pattern. I'm curious, how do we actually go about reflecting on ourselves in a way that's productive, not just self-criticism in disguise?
Well, Dr. Schaub has a really interesting exercise for this. He calls it realign with your essence.
Okay.
It's a visualization technique where you imagine peeling away all the layers of conditioning and limiting beliefs to uncover the true essence of who you are.
I love that. It's like we're excavating our authentic selves from beneath all the shoulds and expectations. So it's about getting to the core of who we are, what we value, and what truly matters to us.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery, unearthing those unique gifts and talents that have been hidden beneath those survival patterns.
I can see how that would be incredibly empowering. Okay, what about self-commitment, the antidote to the helper pattern? I'll admit, this is one I really struggle with. I'm great at making commitments to others. But when it comes to myself, well, let's just say my follow-through could use some work.
You're not alone. Self-commitment is about honoring our commitments to ourselves, both big and small. It's about showing up for ourselves consistently,
Right.
even when it's hard, even when we're tired, even when we don't feel like it.
It's like we're flexing that self-discipline muscle, proving to ourselves that we're reliable and worthy of our own trust.
That's a great way to put it. And self-care plays a huge role in self-commitment. Dr. Schaub emphasizes that taking care of our physical, emotional, and spiritual needs is essential for having the energy and resilience to follow through on our goals.
That makes a lot of sense. If we're running on empty, it's no wonder we struggle to keep our commitments to ourselves. It's like we're trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach.
Exactly. Self-care isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the foundation of self-commitment. And speaking of foundations, let's talk about self-love, the antidote to the lover pattern.
This one feels like the key to it all, wouldn't you say? Like, if we can truly love and accept ourselves, then all the other keys fall into place.
Absolutely. Self-love is the foundation of everything. It's about accepting ourselves fully flaws. It's about recognizing our inherent worthiness regardless of our achievements or external validation.
Yeah, it's like we're giving ourselves that unconditional love and acceptance that we're often seeking from others.
Precisely. And it's not about being arrogant or conceited. It's about recognizing our own value and treating ourselves with kindness and respect.
I love how Dr. Schaub suggests practicing gratitude as a way to cultivate self-love.
Yeah.
It's about shifting our focus to the positive and appreciating all the good in our lives, including the good in ourselves.
It's a powerful practice.
Yeah.
When we focus on what we're grateful for, we naturally feel more content and connected to ourselves and the world around us. It's like we're training our minds to see the beauty in everything, including ourselves.
This is all so inspiring, but I have to be honest, it also feels like a lot to take in. How do we actually integrate these practices into our already busy lives? I mean, I'm all for self-empowerment, but I'm not sure I have time to meditate for an hour every day or go on a silent retreat.
And you don't have to, Dr. Schaub suggests starting small. Choose one key to focus on and create a simple daily practice that supports that key. It can be as simple as spending 5 minutes each morning visualizing yourself as the confident, empowered person you want to be.
Or maybe setting aside 15 minutes each evening to journal about the things you're grateful for.
Exactly. It's about making self-empowerment a priority, even if it's just a few minutes each day. Those small, consistent actions can lead to profound transformations over time. It's like compound interest, but for personal growth.
I like that analogy. So it's not about overnight success, it's about those small daily deposits into our self-empowerment account.
Exactly. And it's not just about personal growth. It's about creating a ripple effect in the world. Dr. Schaub argues that as we become more empowered, we naturally inspire others to do the same.
It's like we're raising the vibration of the entire planet one empowered choice at a time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, exploring the 6 keys to self-empowerment and some practical ways to cultivate them. But I have a feeling you're about to drop another wisdom bomb on us.
Yeah.
What about the challenges of staying in this empowered state? Life throws curveballs, things happen, and it's easy to slip back into those old survival patterns. What do we do then?
You're absolutely right. It's not a one-and-done deal.
Mm.
Dr. Schaub talks about what he calls the back to survival mode loop.
Okay.
It's like a default setting our brains revert to when we feel threatened or stressed.
Yeah.
It can feel like we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Right.
Like that time I got passed over for a promotion I really wanted.
Oh, yeah.
My inner critic went into overdrive telling me I wasn't good enough, smart enough, experienced enough. It was like all my self-empowerment work went out the window.
It's like those old neural pathways are still there just waiting to be reactivated. But the good news is we can choose to respond differently. Dr. Schaub provides a really helpful framework called Dynamic Awareness Reframing. It's a 4-step process that helps us consciously shift our perspective and choose more empowering responses.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's break it down. What's step 1?
Step 1 is recognize.
Okay.
It's about becoming aware of when we've slipped back into survival mode. It's noticing those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that signal we're running those old patterns.
Like that feeling of tightness in my chest or that sudden urge to isolate myself from others, those are my telltale signs.
Exactly. Awareness is key. Once we recognize we're in the loop, we can move to step 2, which is reflect.
So we take a step back and ask ourselves some tough questions, right?
Right. Dr. Schaub suggests asking ourselves, what's the old story I'm telling myself? What's the evidence that supports this story? Is this story serving me?
So it's about challenging those assumptions and limiting beliefs that are driving our survival responses. Instead of blindly accepting those thoughts, we put them on trial.
Exactly. We examine the evidence and see if it holds up.
Yeah.
Often we find that those stories are based on fear, not facts.
And then we move on to step 3, rewrite.
This is where we get to create a new story, one that's more empowering and aligned with our authentic selves.
So instead of beating ourselves up for not getting that promotion, we might rewrite the story to focus on the lessons learned, the new opportunities that might arise, or the fact that we're brave enough to go after what we want.
Exactly. Dr. Schaub suggests asking ourselves, what's a more empowering perspective? What are my strengths and resources in this situation? What actions can I take that are in alignment with my values?
It's about reclaiming our power and choosing to respond from a place of strength and clarity rather than fear and self-doubt.
And finally, we have step 4, rehearse.
This is where we practice our new story, right? Like embedding it into our subconscious mind so it becomes our new default setting.
Precisely. Dr. Schaub suggests using visualization techniques to imagine ourselves responding to similar situations in the future, using our new empowered responses. It's about creating new neural pathways that support our desired outcomes.
It's like we're training our brains to choose empowerment over survival even when things get tough.
Exactly. And the more we practice, the easier it becomes.
Yeah.
Those new pathways become stronger and stronger, while the old fear-based pathways weaken.
It's like we're literally rewiring our brains for success and happiness. This is incredible. I'm already starting to feel more empowered just talking about it.
That's the power of awareness and conscious choice.
Yeah.
We're not victims of our past or our circumstances.
Yeah.
We have the power to create the lives we desire, one empowered choice at a time.
Wow, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. You know, I'm starting to see how these patterns have been playing out in my own life.
Yeah.
And more importantly, how to break free from them.
It's amazing, isn't it, when we bring awareness to those subconscious patterns,
Mm-hmm.
we take back our power. We're no longer just reacting, we're responding with intention.
It's not about being perfect or never facing challenges, right? Life is going to throw curveballs.
Yeah.
But it's about having the tools to navigate those challenges in a way that aligns with, our values and our authentic selves.
Exactly. It's about that shift from simply surviving to truly